So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our story of NCD-free, and I suppose how we came to wanting to address this issue, and how we came to think about the need for bringing different communications, different people, and tapping into the creative energy in order to kind of really try and break through. And what I'm going to share with you is really how we've thought about it, how we think about the problem, but also just to say that I suppose we see it very much as it's an experiment. It's a constant work in progress, and we've only been around for about the last 2 years, and we're kind of continually trying to find new ways to kind of innovate, if you like, in order to address this really important problem. Can you hear me at the back? Thanks. So I'm going to be tethered to the computer, so I'm sorry, otherwise I would prefer to walk around. So forgive me for that. So NCD-free really kind of came about because we were a bunch of people that thought, well, this is a big problem. We want to see a world free from preventable NCDs, or non-communicable diseases. And part of the driver for that was, like, a lot of us kind of came from public health backgrounds or medical backgrounds, and we sat around in these kind of conferences, and everybody would say, oh, the problem with NCDs is that they're defined by what they are not. And how are we going to communicate that? How are we going to get people to care? So we took that, but we also recognised that many of the non-communicable diseases, who's just hands up, who's from a health background here? Okay, so as you'll know, the vast majority, at least the way that the WHO has defined it, share kind of 4 common risk factors. But from a global health perspective, they've been the elephant in the room. They've been the silent killers on a massive scale, and it was time to do something. And so when we looked around, we thought, well, there are these barriers to social and political action at a kind of local, national, and at a global level. I'll just go through these very quickly. And these are some myths that, that we thought needed to be dispelled, and are being dispelled, I think, kind of quite actively, but that NCDs are diseases of tomorrow. Well, they're not. They're clearly very much a global problem today. 63% of deaths, according to the latest burden of disease studies, and that's increasing. So whilst communicable diseases kind of continue to come down because of efforts towards the Millennium Development Goals and other things, what we see is that by 2030, very clearly, non-communicable diseases, these so-called NCDs, will be by far the leading cause of global death and disability. They're a rich world problem. We hear this time and time again, sitting around the table. Why should we care? Well, we care because most of us kind of are engaged in this because we care about global health. And in actual fact, over 80% of the burden in over 80% of the burden of NCDs occurs in low middle income countries. And as we heard, they're very much a poverty catalyst. They strike, the poorest who maybe have survived other issues and now kind of having to address NCDs much earlier on. They're a disease of ageing. We hear this all the time, and very much, that's not an unreasonable statement to make. I mean, some of the burden is being driven by that, but very much in developing countries, we see NCDs occurring many years earlier, up to 10 years earlier for the first heart attack. 9 million deaths under 60, 9 million preventable deaths, 90% of those taking place in low middle income countries. They only affect men. Well, this isn't true. In fact, NCDs cause over 65% of all female deaths. That they're due to laziness. That whilst, very much driven by the lifestyles that we lead and the exporting or the globalisation of the risk factors, we know very clearly that NCDs are linked to the social determinants of health. They follow things like lack of education, lack of employment, urban planning, social equity. These are very important. They represent how we build society. They're an impossible task. It's not really anything that we can do about it. It's not that easy. Well, we know that 80% of heart disease and diabetes and a third of cancers are preventable, which represents millions of needless premature deaths. and that they're a theoretical, jargonistic concept. They're a non-something or other. And really, NCDs are real and need to be widely recognised as such. And in much the same way that many people didn't necessarily know what HIV stood for, they understood that it was an important global health problem. So what they represent is really what's crucial. So we thought really the first place to start was what we need to do is communicate an accurate face and narrative of a global epidemic. And for many of us, that meant rebranding, some of the things that we're going to hear from some real experts here tonight, to rebrand NCDs, but with a focus on the opportunities. So let's kind of think about where are the opportunities in all of this and how can we lead that change. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring some different kinds of thinking. We wanted to stop thinking in the traditional public health way that I suppose we saw as being non-productive. We wanted to talk more about health. We saw the opportunity in this to talk about health. Let's not worry about health care so much, though we will talk about that from a primary care perspective and other things. Let's think about prevention. Let's think about and talk about how this could lead to us building healthier societies. Our societies currently promote, if these diseases are caused by lifestyle, maybe we can reimagine, rethink how we build societies. How can we look out from, to the world and leverage all of the great things that's going on in design, the incredible technological advances? How can we harness social media in order to get our message out there? And really importantly, how do we tap into these creative communities, recognizing that we in the tent didn't necessarily have all of the answers to these problems. We're very good often at preaching to ourselves and preaching to the choir, but how can we get some fresh ideas into the room? And really, through all of this, how can we build awareness of this big problem that we identified and we're very passionate about? How can we inspire people to have their own ideas? We certainly don't have ownership of all of the ideas. And how ultimately can we catalyze change? And so that's what we set about doing. This is a little snapshot of just part of the NCD Free team, but most importantly, many of you will know Sandro on the top left, himself and his brother. So Sandro's another kind of very passionate global health advocate, medical doctor, and his brother Giuseppe, who's actually a brand specialist himself, working with has a design agency called Local Peoples, and it was kind of the two of them kind of coming together saying, maybe this is a different type of problem. It's not so much a health problem, maybe it's a branding problem, and we'll hear some more about that. And very much kind of trying to bring together a diverse group of people with different skills, but all kind of motivated by this cause. We had some support from some very kind partners who are all there. And in 2013, we basically launched NCD Free as a global social movement, but also as a kind of social enterprise, social startup that's trying to catalyse change in this area. And what our main goal is to put NCDs on the millennial map. So make the youth of today understand that these are not only problems of tomorrow, but very much kind of problems of today as well. And so we wanted to engage them in the way that, they engage through technology. We wanted to kind of be creative in our marketing, if you like, in the way that we communicate the message of what the problem is. So using things like cartoons and infographics to represent really important public health problems. This is aligning ourselves with similar groups, so looking at the impact that climate change has on health and where is the overlap between these things here. And this is a infographic, I'm not sure how well it comes up there, but that was done for the Climate and Health Alliance for the IPCC report that just came out. We want to tell stories, and that's one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit more about tonight, but we wanted to use the medium of film and video, and particularly online video, as a means to be able to get real stories out there and to work with professional, established but also up and coming filmmakers in order to kind of get real human stories out there. And then we wanted to take our message to a wider audience. We wanted to kind of take it to the people, so to speak, not just in technology, but also, you know, out in the world. And we ran 2 events last year, one in Boston and one in Melbourne. And these really kind of brought short, kind of like TED-style type events where we got people from very different backgrounds, but who all cared about, you know, building a healthier future, really. So people from urban planning, people from health, people from economics, people from design, people from technology, and give them a platform, and also invite people from, you know, make it a global forum. So we sponsored people to come within Melbourne from the Asia Pacific region, and in Boston more from sub-Saharan Africa and others. And we wanted to kind of use other forms of communication. So these are some comedians that did a little bit of a skit and a little bit of a sketch. So it was really about trying to find new ways to get our message across. And central to this phase, if you like, of what we've been doing has been to create this platform. So to create a platform to tell kind of the inspiring stories of young change makers working in different parts of the world. This is Shasmitha, a wonderful young woman who works for an NGO that's about trying to address the forgotten problem of cancer in her country in Bangladesh. It's remarkable. And as part of all of this and kind of using those events as a showcase, we wanted to make, we crowdfunded some money to put all of this together. We wanted to make a few short films. And myself, together with Batsheva, who was the director on this film, and a cameraman, Tom, we travelled to Ghana to tell the story of a young man called Emmanuel Sanwok, who Sandro had actually met, who was studying in Copenhagen a few years before, who was incredibly passionate about addressing this problem that he saw of NCDs in his community in a rural part of Ghana. And we wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to really kind of shine a light on this problem, to show what real people are doing, and show people that these are problems that happen all over the world, and engage with professional filmmakers to help us kind of craft that story and to help us kind of with our message. And I just want to invite, Batsheva's going to share a few words on that, and then we've got a few clips from that film that we'd like to share with you.
So, hi. I have a really hard time talking about this film because it was really difficult to make. And I see most of you are from a health background, so I'm just going to sort of be straight with you about it. So I made a living as a freelancer, mostly in broadcast television in the UK for about 8 years. And I didn't get paid to come to people to tell ordinary stories. I worked mostly in documentary. And what you do is you find the most salacious, the most insurmountable, the most interesting, the saddest, or the most tragic story, and that's how you sell your work. And I was then approached by these guys, Fred and Sandro, to go somewhere that's generally portrayed as salacious, sad, tragic, irredeemable in a Western view, and just tell a really ordinary, loving, wonderful, beautiful story in that kind of way. And I basically said to myself, oh my God, I'm never going to work again afterwards. But that's not what happened. So I learned a great lesson from this. And I sort of thought to myself over and over again as we put the film together, how am I going to package this? How am I going to sell this when I get back to London and I have to get work in the fall? And what kept coming to mind was, I'm bringing new news from Africa. I'm not bringing you pictures of hungry babies. I'm not bringing you pictures of people killing each other. Not to say that that doesn't happen. Of course, people bring different kind of images. But in general, when I was hired to make films about the inner city or about London youth or in developing areas, this wasn't what I was asked to do. I mean, this is a young middle-class guy who's dealing with a very Western problem in a place that is pretty peaceful and normal. So that's my take on the film. It's new news from Africa, and these are the problems that bring us all together. And so I'm just going to show you, so that I also shut up, a tiny little montage from the film. And I hope that you appreciate that these are not the kind of images that usually pique everyone's interest in this part of the world about that part of the world. They're just real. Is that one?
I developed a passion and chose to go into NCDs because of the neglect. People would actually be surprised knowing that the NCD situation in the developing countries are not much different from the developed countries. If you go out mostly late in the evenings, especially weekends, you find a lot of people drinking and eating a lot of fast food and a lot of fatty food, just like any other city in the world. Facing NCDs in this part of the world is a very huge task. The difference for now is that the people who suffer from NCDs in the developed countries, they receive much better care. We need to get everybody understand. Let everybody be aware that these are the problems we are facing. Because if the people get to know about non-communicable diseases, they get to know about the risk factors, then they can buy into the education and then they begin to change their lifestyles, and then we can be making an impact. The Non-Communicable Disease Task Force is a team of health workers who have been put together to screen people in the Upper West region for non-communicable diseases. While the services are free, the additional cost of travel and accessories for testing can cost an individual up to like $30 in a week. And $30 is equivalent to a whole household income for a month. So if someone is suffering from non-communicable diseases, he travels very far distances and they spend almost all the family income taking care of themselves. And so you can imagine the poverty level, you can imagine the stress it brings to the family. Very simple things that can be done to help NCDs prevention and control. We need to build the capacity of health staff. We need to build the capacity of the health systems itself, the facilities to comprehensively screen and manage non-communicable diseases. If we get help in these areas, I can promise you there is going to be a dramatic change and effect.
So that's just a few, thanks. That's not the whole film, so the film's available on the website, and you can see there was just a few clips that we kind of put together, so if it seemed a bit disjointed, that might have been why. But thanks for that, Jenna. So I just want to finish off really to tell you kind of what we're doing next. And really, you know, as this infographic shows, though we're not talking necessarily about NCDs, we're really just at the tip of the iceberg. Like, I think that for us, the journey is only just beginning, and it's really about how can we find different, creative, novel ways to try to break through, and it's through audiences like this, it's having these types of discussions, it's engaging with this wider community that we believe, you know, change can occur. And so in this year, what we've done is we've started playing around with this idea of a global health advocacy boot camp. And this is the first class of 2014 that was just run in Melbourne literally 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was open to kind of anybody, but a lot of people working in the social sector, in public health, but also in design and communications and technology, coming together to kind of talk about some of these issues, but also to develop some skills to be better advocates, to be better leaders in the future, but better communicators very much. And you know, these were the core things that we focused on. It was just an intense kind of 2-day program where people were introduced really to new ideas. You know, I think what we recognise is that there's a lot of value in just bringing new ideas to people, challenging them. So part of this was, you know, getting people from a social entrepreneurship background to talk about how they came up with ideas. What's the process of innovation? How do you use design thinking or human-centered design or these types of things that are applied within the business sector very successfully? How could we challenge people to think about these within this other kind of sector? And people were broken up into small groups. They were set challenges. They had to, very much like what might happen later on, they were given pitching competitions. and they had to work together in order to come up with new ways of trying to deliver, an old message, if you like, and left very much with the tools to be able to go on, play more, innovate themselves, and hopefully be on the path to being better communicators in the new world. And so I just wanted to leave you with a short clip of that process.
We actually have to think about changing the way that society engages in philanthropy. We have to change the philanthropy market. Instead of changing our behaviour, we work with something that we all do every single day as consumers, and we use the profits from our everyday purchases to turn us into philanthropists. I loved solving problems and innovating and working with markets. It wasn't business problems that I was passionate about, and I realised that I didn't want to solve business problems, I wanted to solve social problems.
Where the change happens is when you give new language. So you're building on their vocabulary, you're building on their knowledge base, and giving kids a language around mental health, and that's what's actually going to create the change.
Uniting your human capacities, uniting yourself through mindful practice, using things like the 3 Bs here.
Society as a whole only changes if in a sense individuals change. On the other hand, individuals change by virtue of what's happening in society, what's the environment around them. I think with most of the big sort of societal issues that we're facing at the moment, that's where the answer is. It is not with our elected leaders. They are following us, not the other way around.
Okay. So I suppose I just wanted to leave you then with the challenge, if you like. And I think that the challenge as we see it is really engage in problems, whether it's NCDs or something else, but also recognise that sometimes the solutions lie outside of the traditional thinking. And I think that's really the lesson that we've learnt through this experience, and the lesson I think we'd like to share the most is that, as we'll hear from our next kind of 2 extraordinary speakers, that there's a lot to be learnt from the worlds of communication, from the worlds of design, and there's a lot of great things that we can do with technology if we harness it appropriately. So get involved if you want to get involved with NCD Free. Get on the website. You can follow us on all of the channels: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel now as well. And really look out for opportunities to learn new skills and to become better communicators, because certainly in health and in global health, that's what we need more of. So thank you very much.
Before you go away, are there any brief questions for Fred and Batsheva? You'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end as well. Yeah, over there.
My name's Harold Lipman, and I represent an organisation called International Cardiac Healthcare, as I was saying, very closely involved in a similar field of part of NCDs, most important part possibly. We have a project in part of Russia, and in fact we'll be teaching a 10-seminar course on preventive cardiology in Russia in Russian, which was developed and devised at our instigation here in UCL in the Department of Population Health. Some very interesting ideas, because one of the biggest problems is, of course, we're teaching doctors and healthcare professionals, but the next stage is how do you influence the general public to modify and change their behaviors. And this is where obviously NCD Free comes in. A lot of interesting ideas you've thrown up, But I just wanted to ask, and I'd like to have the opportunity to speak with you afterwards, but I'd just like to ask the question, these boot camps, how on earth did you manage to persuade or influence so many people to attend them and participate?
And I think that what we find is that by aligning it to not just talking about health, but talking about like healthy societies, talking about the sustainability aspect, realizing that in actual fact, there are all sorts of people that are interested in how can we build health promoting societies, but they just don't think about it from a health perspective. There are designers that want to create, spaces that people enjoy being in. There are urban planners that recognise the need for active transport. There are all sorts of people that are our natural allies in this, I suppose, vision of health promoting societies. And that's where we've got to be, a bit more savvy about how to tap into that, how to build those bridges and not see it purely as a heart disease prevention program. And that's where we also get lots of really exciting different ideas, because otherwise, we're kind of just talking to people that we're very comfortable talking with. And so by doing that, we found that there was a lot of interest and a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm sure that there would be similarly, in other places where we will take this boot camp.
Thank you. John Grummett. I'm from an organisation called the International Diabetes Federation.
Okay.
We created, at the end of 2011, a Young Leaders Programme, which has taken off globally and has been an enormous success. And it gave us, I'm a non-exec of this thing, it gave us a really good kick up the backside. And immensely powerful and very, very refreshing. So I commend what you're doing. What I'd like to suggest is, so we've got young leaders, 260 countries, so basically anywhere in the world they exist. And it's tragic that we do these things in silos. So get on it. There's a load of toolkits we've already designed, we can share, and there's nothing like you guys doing this in a creative way without the shackles, because the biggest kick up the arse we got was how innovative and how quick nimble you can be compared to the stuff when we sit around tables with our ties on having conversations about stuff and doing nothing about it. So the Young Leaders Programme on diabetes, I'm sure they'd be very, very interested in getting involved.
Great, thank you. And I should just say, we make all of the materials that we make and others freely available on the website. There are all of the talks from the various events that happened last year, and there will be some more detailed footage of what was done at the NCD3 boot camp, and also some of the pictures from people. So, we want to engage with the community. We're certainly not trying to do this in a proprietary fashion. But I think, to your point, and I thank you for your comment, is that we want to see some of those catalytic changes by bringing in design people, by bringing in better communicators, happen at a faster rate and challenge what sounds like your organisation has done, which is very commendable as well.